If you haven't been with us before, this is a sponsorship workshop. Please do not be concerned if you're new or relatively new. The purpose of this workshop is to help people who are already sponsoring to become better sponsors, and to help those who are just coming up to understand more about how to work with others. But it also has another very important purpose, and that is that we learn a lot that we can apply to ourselves as we go through this. I started this about 14 years ago, and it's been going continuously in some place or another ever since, except for the time I was in prison. And when we started this, it was an 18-week workshop. It's just about doubled now, and probably will continue to grow because there's just so much material to cover, and we try to do it as thoroughly as possible. Right now we're getting close to the end of our study of the Big Book, and the purpose of this is for us to find out where everything is, how it's organized, how it all ties together. And the Big Book, as most of you know, is a very condensed, very dense work, especially the first 164 pages. It was not written as a textbook. It was written as a recital of the experiences of those who were in the fellowship at that time. It is an inspired work, I'm convinced of that. And as such, it can be very confusing because it isn't as well organized as one would like. In fact, it isn't really organized very well at all. And what we find is that much of the material which relates to the chapters in the first few chapters in the book is also amplified and supported by and completed in the following chapters. There are a number of outstanding examples of that. For example, we hear about the progression of the illness right at the beginning. We don't find out anything about what that progression means until we get to the 8th chapter. And the progression of the illness, of the disease, is kind of buried in the chapter to wives. So it's important for us to know that, so we can help our sponsees to identify themselves, to see the progression of the disease within them, and to teach others to find it likewise. Now today we're going to be looking at chapter 7, and chapter 7 begins on page 89, so please open your books up to that. The chapter entitled Working with Others. Notice that these middle chapters all have to do with action. The 5th chapter is how it works, the 6th chapter is into action, and the 7th chapter is working with others. That's significant because it really gives us the clue as to what's going on here. We're being taught what to do, not what to think, not what to cogitate about, not the things that we are to internalize or to make a part of us and all that. These are things we're to do. The whole idea of working the steps is that if we do the work, we will receive the promises. Every time you hear the promises read, remember what it says. They will always materialize if we work for them. And so working with others means precisely that. Now, before we get into this chapter, let's take a quick look all the way back in chapter 1 and see where this came from. Take a look at the bottom of page 14, please. Now, this is in Bill's story, and of course, as we know, Bill had gone to Towns Hospital for the last time. He had detoxed there, and while he was there, his friend Ebby had taught him the steps as they were then being used, the steps which they inherited from the Oxford group, and Bill had worked those steps while he was in the hospital. However, let's see now what happened to him. Let's go on page 14, the next to the last paragraph, which commences, while I lay in the hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given me. Little did he know that our fellowship today is well over 5 million. Perhaps I could help some of them. They in turn might work with others. My friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all of my affairs. Now, it's important to see what's happened here. Bill was still lying in the hospital, and he had worked the first 11 steps as we now know them. But he was inspired to the understanding that there were thousands more out there just like him who would be glad to receive what he had been given. And so he talked this over with Ebby, and here's what Ebby had told him. My friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Now keep in mind here too, because over and over again this same thought is projected and stated in the Big Book. The principles referred to are the steps. The steps are the principles are the steps. There are no principles, cannot be any principles behind the steps. It's a contradiction in terms. And so demonstrating these principles in all of my affairs means to demonstrate to other alcoholics the 12 steps, the principles contained as the integral part of the 12 steps in the effort that we make as we do the work. He goes on to say, particularly was it imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. For faith without works was dead, he said, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. Now here's the rule. This is the basis upon which chapter 7 is built. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, that means work with others, he would surely drink again, and if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. Now, this is a message which is so critical to pass on to our sponsees. We can't fiddle around with this idea. This is basic stuff, because we're talking about the difference here between life and death. We're talking the difference between a program which lasts for a lifetime and a program which fizzles out like a Roman candle somewhere around the 6th or 8th or 9th or month or the first year, somewhere in there. Because without carrying this message, we don't keep it. Without utilizing these principles by passing them on, we don't keep them. Without doing that, we forfeit God's power and grace in our lives and the protection which He has given us against the disease of alcoholism. We forfeit it. We give it up. And so many people do that. And you look around the typical AA meeting today and know that a year from now, if you come back to the same meeting, half the people won't be there. And something like a third of the people may be there after 2 years. And so this is a very, very rough and important imprimatur. We must work and self-sacrifice for others. Now, self-sacrifice is something, by the way, which runs all the way through the program, you know. The 12th tradition is based on self-sacrifice. That is, we sacrifice our need for acclaim, for notoriety, for praise, for power. We sacrifice that by refusing to identify ourselves by our last names. Anonymity has nothing to do with the fear of discovery. All of the thinking around the room's the contrary notwithstanding. It has everything to do with the principle of self-sacrifice. And it ties in directly with the first tradition, that the unity of the fellowship is all important and our personal recovery depends upon it. And in order to ensure the unity of the fellowship, we sacrifice our need for individuality, for claim, for power driving, for all of the notoriety and the praise and so forth that we could receive. Not only that, but we sacrifice the opportunities for financial gain and for personal gain in every aspect. And so self-sacrifice means exactly what it says. That we give without expectation of any return whatsoever. I talked to a man last night, or yesterday afternoon, who's been a counselor, facilitator, psychologist, I don't know what the hell, but for 30 years around the program in various treatment centers. And that poor sucker is sick as a dog. And he finally came to the realization, and he agreed with me, that you can't take this program and make your living out of it. The problem there is that we have an agenda when we're carrying the message, when we're getting paid for it, and other people are telling us what we're to teach, and are checking the results to make sure that we're doing our job. But that doesn't work, because the results have to be left up to God. They're not any. They are not the results cannot be the province of any administrator or somebody who's looking at a financial bottom line. Not if we wish to stay sober. Work and self-sacrifice for others. So Bill went home and he talked to Lois and he told her what he's going to have to do, and she agreed, and he started trying to do it, and it didn't work. For 6 months it didn't work. Finally, at the end of 6 months, he went to see Dr. Silkworth, and he told Dr. Silkworth what was happening, and he was very discouraged. And Dr. Silkworth said to him, "Look, Bill, I know what the problem is, and I'm going to tell you right now, and you've helped me to discover this, so I'm going to illustrate it with your situation." He said, "The second time you were here in the hospital, as you were leaving, I sat you down along with your wife, and I told you that you were a chronic alcoholic, you were hopeless and helpless, that there was no way that medical and scientific solutions, human solutions, were going to work for you, and that if you didn't stop drinking, you'd be dead within a year." He said, "I know that message got through to you somehow, even though you rejected it enough to go out and get drunk again, nevertheless, it got through to you." The other thing he said was, if you're going to work with other alcoholics, they better have some confidence in you. They better believe that you know what the hell you're talking about. And you can't just run up to people, as you've been doing, and say, "You're an alcoholic, you're a drunk, get down on your knees and start praying." They're not going to listen to that. And you grab them and take them into your home, and you feed them, you give them a warm place to sleep. They steal your money and leave. You have given them nothing, because they're not listening. You haven't established your bona fides. So he said, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to first tell your story. They're going to have to be able to identify themselves in some way with you in order to be willing to listen to you. You remember that you've been preached at all your life and you rejected it out of hand. Well, that's what they're doing too. And Bill took this all to heart. And when he went to Akron on that aborted business trip, and he was a real sad puppy, and he ended up in right there in front of that message board at the Mayflower Hotel in Akron, Ohio. And just to the right of that signboard is the bar. And he was ready to pop in there and get out of his misery. Something happened. He was inspired to look at that message board, and on there he saw a number of churches and their schedule of services, and there was a name and phone number of a minister. He went into the lobby, he picked up the phone, and he called the minister, and he told him what the situation was, that he was a sick alcoholic, but he needed to talk to another alcoholic, he needed to carry the message. The minister put him in touch with Henrietta Sieberling, the heiress of the Sieberling tire fortune. And she was acquainted and knew Dr. Bob and had been trying to help Dr. Bob. And that's how he and Dr. Bob got together. Now, at that very point, he remembered what Dr. Silkworth had told him. And so he followed those directions. And Dr. Bob later said that he was the first man who ever spoke to him about this alcoholism and knew what he was talking about. And that's why Bob was willing to listen to him. When we look up here, we see Bill and Bob sitting with Bill D., AA number 3. And they're doing exactly what Bill had learned was the way to approach a new person. The reason for going through all of this is to illustrate how the genesis of chapter 7, the methodology which is expressed here in working with a new person, is precisely the expansion of what Bill had learned in those first in that first successful attempt to get somebody else sober. They expanded on it, but the basics are still the same. And when we get into this chapter, the first 8 pages expostulate that methodology. In other words, we don't have to wonder what to do with a new guy or new gal. It's right here. You just pick the book up and read it, and it tells you exactly what to do. Now, if you're willing to do it, you're going to get results. And Bill D. learned from them. He took this out and started started a group, and he was out there doing it, and they taught people, they taught each other from there on how to go about doing this, and it ended up here as chapter 7. Before we get into the steps that we take in working with a new person, let's take a look at page 89. There's more background here. Let's read the first couple of sentences. Practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity. Notice the word immunity. Immune. We've taken a shot for it. Immunity from drinking. As intensive work with other alcoholics. Remember, work and self-sacrifice for others. This is not playtime. Sponsorship is the most serious and the most demanding and the most blessed of activities that we ever engage in. We are empowered by having worked the steps ourselves to carry this message. And we're given the opportunity to be instrumental in the lives of other human beings who will otherwise die. That's a pretty awesome responsibility. And the whole point of working the steps is to prepare ourselves for this responsibility. Bill called it our holy mission. And I believe he was right. It works when other activities fail. What did Bill say? We just read it. If an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain low spots ahead. Notice that. Perfect and enlarge spiritual life. Over and over again, the same message comes flooding through. When we get to the third step prayer, the third sentence in the third step prayer, we ask God to take away our difficulties so that victory over them may bear witness to those we would help of His power, His love, and His way of life. Our first solemn prayer, our third step prayer, asks God to do exactly what He gives us when we get to the 12th step. He empowers us to carry this message, and by the acts of His grace in our lives, we have been relieved from our guilt and remorse and shame, from our insanities, and from our defects of character. And we have been restored to sanity, and we've entered the world of spirit. And we get to demonstrate all of this to new people by our actions. And we ask God right in the beginning to do this for us. Why do you suppose that's in the third step prayer, if this isn't the most solemn of our commitments? As we go forward, when we get into the fourth step, and the fourth step prayer for resentments. How can I be helpful to him? When we get to the fourth step section on our sex inventory, on page 70 it tells us that sex is very troublesome. We turn our thoughts to somebody we can help, that this takes us out of ourselves and quiets the imperious urge, when to yield would mean heartache. It goes on and on, the beat goes on. Go to the 7-step prayer on page 76. Again, we ask God to take away all of these defects of character which stand in the way of our usefulness to God and our fellows. We go to the top of page 77. We learn that our real purpose here is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. The beat goes on. It's very important to remember what we learned there in that fourth step, that when we turn our thoughts to someone we can help, this takes us out of ourselves. This means then that we're looking here at a tool of surrender, getting out of self. If that isn't the most critical thing we do, it sure comes close, because remember that being buried in self is a perfect definition of insanity. And when I'm buried in self and I'm buried in my head, I'm blocking God out, and if I'm blocking God out, I'm in dire trouble. When self and selfishness and self-centeredness and self-centered fear and self-delusion take over, I'm in deep trouble, because I'm cut off from God, cut off from the sunlight of the Spirit. I've left no room for God in my life. Therefore, it is absolutely necessary that I stay free of self as I go through each day. Now, chapter 7 and what we have just read illustrates one of the 3 principal tools we have been given to stay out of self. Now, some of these things are a bit subtle, and we don't necessarily recognize them on a first, 10th, or 15th reading of the Big Book. That's why one of the reasons for doing this workshop is that we get to find this stuff out. Turn to page 85. The first of the tools that we're taught for staying out of self is right here in the middle paragraph. How, and it's about 5 lines up in the bottom of that paragraph. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish, proper use of the will. What is that but pure surrender? Thy will, not mine, be done. In the third step, we ask God to take our will and our lives into His hands. Here we are reiterating that prayer. Thy will, not mine, be done. Go to page 87, down at the bottom of the page. Last line. We constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, Thy will be done. Each of our prayers ends with, Thy will be done. Thy will, not mine, be done. On page 86 and the top of 87, we have the second tool of surrender, meditation. So we have the prayer of surrender, we have meditation, and in meditation we surrender. We give up. We're seeking knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry that out. We are not interested in having our will be done. We are interested in having God's will be done. But we need to find out what His will is. Remember, we talked about this last week. If we pray and then we walk away from God and don't listen for the answer, of what value is that? But when we pray and then we meditate and we're willing to accept the answer that we're given, that's when we learn, and that's when we surrender, and we give up as we meditate. Remember, we learned this back in the fourth step too, that when we meditate, the right answer will come if we want it. That's that big if. Are we willing to receive from God the answer, regardless of what it may be, without in any way trying to dictate the terms of that answer? And so now we see that we have three tools to stay out of self each day. Our prayers of surrender, our meditation, and our working with others. And when we assiduously follow that on a rigorous, disciplined basis, we stay out of self. This is hard to do, I recognize. But you and I, as sponsors, can't back away from something just because it's hard to do. We do not teach the easier, softer way. If we do, this is a travesty. This is a terrible thing to do. You might as well push people in front of buses if you're going to do that. So we teach them the way of the big book. And we explain to them that this is simple, as Bill said, simple but not easy. A price has to be paid. It means that we must turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all. But when we carry this message, we can look each of these people in the eye with assurance and tell them, if you do exactly as I have done and exactly as I teach you, and you don't drag your feet, and you don't make excuses, I promise you that you'll be just fine. And I also promise you that I will show you every step of the way exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it and where it is in the book. Fair enough? And we get the commitment. Right, Kev? We get the commitment. Right, Billy? You know to do that.
Amen. Thank you, God.
All right. Let's go on page 89 now. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. Now then, this next paragraph, if you're a sponsor or contemplating sponsorship, meditate on this paragraph. Think about this. Life will take on new meaning. To watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. And what do we do in the meetings? This is where we have contact with each other and with newcomers. When we avoid meetings, we listen to our well-meaning friends who say, you're just becoming an AA junkie. You just substituted your obsession with alcohol for an obsession with meetings. You got to get a life, man. You got to balance your life.
Yeah.
Which means precisely take over again. Forget the fact that you have dedicated your life to God's will, and you've asked Him without reservation to take your life and your will into His hands. Forget all that. Take it back. Manage your own life again. Play God again. Be general manager of your universe again. And we will wave bye-bye to you. When I hear people get up here and say, I've decided to balance my life, I give them about 6 weeks before they drink again. Can't help it. The basics never change. We're powerless over alcohol. We're always going to be powerless over alcohol. That's the nature of the disease, and the disease is incurable. Our one hope is to put God between us and the booze. And when we get in His pocket and stay there, we're safe. When we climb out of His pocket and decide, oh, the heck with this, I've got it made now. I'll get to a few meetings, sure. I got a call from a lady this morning. She hadn't been to a meeting in 6 weeks. She used to go to meetings every day. And she is suffering, and she's been around a long time. And I said to her, why am I not surprised? And why are you surprised? You know better. You know what happens. You know when you lose the commitment to sobriety, you begin to lose your sobriety. You're walking around with untreated alcoholism. You don't get to meetings. You don't have anybody to help. You don't have anybody to help support you in your recovery. You're out there alone just like you used to be. When we can get to a meeting, we get to a meeting. Now then, let's see. Some of you are taking notes. Let me give you a synopsis of the methodology, the steps we take in working with a newcomer. And you will find all of this backed up here in the big book in these pages from 90 through 98, or 96. 90 through 96. Well, actually, it starts on 90, on 90, that's right. Here's the way it goes, just in summary. First, we get the new person alone. No mob scenes. No whole bunch of old-timers standing around trying to prove which one has the greatest program. We lose the newcomer immediately. This is a one-on-one program. On page 100 it says, both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. That's what this is. It's one person, one alcoholic helping another. Get your newcomer alone if possible. Find out as much as you can about him or her without appearing to be too nosy. This is not an autobiography. This is not treatment center bullshit. We just want to know enough about the person to know kind of whom we're speaking with and to get acquainted with them and to have some idea of their background. Once having done that, if the person still wants to listen, we're not going to force ourselves on anybody. But if at this point they're still willing to listen, now we tell them about our drinking, how we drank. We tell them about our drinking career in essence. And we begin to see that they're saying, oh yeah, it sounds like me. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, when we have gotten partly into that, we can ask them, does this sound pretty familiar to you? Maybe we can get them to talk about themselves a little bit. Once having done that, we're then going to tell them how alcohol affected us. We're going to tell them about the terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair, about the overwhelming anger and the pulsating fears, the terrors. We're going to tell them about our dishonesties, and we're going to tell them how we tried to stop and we couldn't. And we'll tell them about some of the methods we used. We're going to tell them that we realized finally that we were whipped. We had met our master. Alcohol was our master. If they're still interested after that, then we're going to tell them of what's the matter with them. This was one of the great contributions that Dr. Silkworth made. He said, tell them what's wrong with them, Bill. Tell them about this disease. Tell them about the fact that if they're a chronic alcoholic, they have an incurable, progressive, deadly disease. And tell them about the aspects of this disease, the physical as well as the mental, emotional, spiritual, and moral aspects. Show them that there is a physical allergy here, that when we take the first drink it sets off a phenomenon of craving, and it affects us just as any other allergy would, and that this allergy is not common to all humans, but occurs only in the alcoholic. Tell them about the spiritual bankruptcy, the obsession and compulsion to drink, the strange twists of character and thinking, which lead to the next drink. That all of these are symptomatic of the disease of alcoholism, and if they're a chronic alcoholic, they're suffering from these as well. They will see, as we do this, examples in their own lives of how this has happened. They will remember that they set out to have a couple of drinks and ended up in a blackout, maybe in jail or the hospital, having lost their car or whatever it was that happened to them. They will remember that they reached a point very quickly after that first drink where they could no longer stop. They will also remember that there were times when they were able to stop, and they're going to want to argue with you maybe. You tell them, sure, that happens once in a while. But when you reach a certain point, and you may not have reached yet, you will not be able to stop, period. And for the real solid, sick, sore, and wounded alcoholic, they probably reached that point long ago. They know that this is the truth. If they're still interested now in talking to us, the next thing we're going to do is tell them how we recovered. Remember chapter 5, if you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you're ready to work certain steps. So we're going to tell them how we recovered. And there's a very important part of the big book which relates to this. Look at the top of page 93. Three lines down from the top. Tell him exactly what happened to you. Stress the spiritual feature freely. This is the first meeting, remember. This is not 6 months down the road when he might possibly have gotten around to the idea that he's not totally turned off by God. Now, we have to wonder where some of this stuff comes from when the big book is so explicit. And I guess the reason the big book is explicit is because it is always consistent. It is internally consistent. It never, and I've never been able to find inconsistency. Other books, every other book, in fact, including spiritual writings, have inconsistencies. This one does not. It's entirely internally consistent. And one of the things which it makes clear over and over again, for example, on page 45, that what this book is all about, its main purpose and title, is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself which will solve your problem. And this means we're going to talk about God. And this book was written for the newcomer. God is in 5 of the steps. Why is it that we feel, and some people are so insistent upon this, that we don't talk about God with a new person? Because we might scare them off. We don't want to talk about the spiritual recovery. We want to say things to them like this: well, if you don't drink, you won't get drunk. Now that's pretty simple, ain't it? Gee, I never thought about that. I've heard people actually sit up here and say, it never occurred to me. If I didn't take the first drink, I wouldn't get drunk. How could that not occur to you? It's the most obvious thing in the whole world, isn't it? Don't drink and go to meetings. Don't worry about any of this other stuff. Just don't drink and get to meetings. And remember that if you stick around long enough, the miracle will come.
That's not true.
And meeting makers make it.
That work the steps.
I'll tell you when you're ready to work the steps. The big book, therefore, does not lie, and it tells us not to lie. Stress the spiritual freely, because if you're telling somebody how you recovered, and you don't tell them about the spiritual program of action you worked to recover, you're lying to them. How can I tell you how I recovered without telling you about the spiritual course of action I took, which is contained in the 12 steps? Billy.
Thank you, Jim. I'm grateful, Billy, and I'm listening to you, and I have a real problem. Like I hear from these free thinker groups and stuff,
Yeah?
and it's like they have no concept of God. They don't believe in God, and I don't know how anybody can recover not believing in God or a power greater than themselves.
Well, there's
Explain that
an
to
easy
me.
answer to that. They find their better selves.
What?
Their better selves. And in chapter 4 it tells us that we're going to find God down deep inside ourselves, and that's what they find. They just don't want to call it God. You go to the Free Thinkers meeting at the Little River Club on a Sunday, and you'll find 4 or 5 people there who are avowed agnostics or atheists, and everybody else is just a curious onlooker. And the gal who led that for 18 years she stayed sober on Valium. She was
That'll work.
but Marge was a good gal, and she sponsored a lot of people who were not atheists or agnostics and took them through the steps, and she sponsored quite a few people and helped them get sober. So she was willing to do that, and I had a lot of different talks with her, but she finally had to agree with me that when she talked about her better self that she found deep down inside herself, maybe another name for that could possibly be God, although she didn't believe it. So that's what. Yes, Johnny.
Yeah, I mean that really pisses me off, man. I'm being quite honest. Like, when I'm feeling no pain, it's really easy for me to get all spiritual and connected with God. But when I'm really suffering, that's what really counts. Then am I gonna get spiritual? Not. I'm just saying, man. If I was doing like, I couldn't control anything I do is gonna lead me back to dope. But I'm I'm saying if I was doing see, I'm not a good example of that, but if someone was just doing something and didn't lead them back to what they were doing, but they were just like coping or whatever, I don't think that's right.
Okay,
I don't think they're in any position to be sponsoring anybody, and anything they say, you gotta look at it like, well, you know, they're all freaking high, man, you know? I'd like to be shooting dope right now, but I'm not, you know?
okay, well, I think a lot of people in here probably agree with you, Johnny. Turn to page 95 now. The top of page 95, we've gone through these various steps we talked about before the break. Top of page 95, unless your friend wants to talk further about himself, do not wear out your welcome. Give him a chance to think it over. If you do stay, let him steer the conversation in any direction he likes. Sometimes a new man is anxious to proceed at once, and you may be tempted to let him do so. This is sometimes a mistake. If he has trouble later, he's likely to say you rushed him. You'll be most successful with alcoholics if you do not exhibit any passion for crusade or reform. Never talk down to an alcoholic from any moral or spiritual hilltop. Simply lay out the kit of spiritual tools for his inspection. Show him how they worked with you. Offer him friendship and fellowship. Tell him if he wants to get well, you will do anything to help. If he's not interested in your solution, if he expects you to act only as a banker for his financial difficulties or a nurse for his sprees, you may have to drop him until he changes his mind. This he may do after he gets hurt some more. Now this next paragraph is very important. And it goes directly to the first step. Before we get into this paragraph, remember that this big book was written for the new person. It was written for the person who was out there in the hinterlands, did not have a group, perhaps knew of no alcoholics who were in recovery at all, who was going to have to find his own way or her own way through the reading of the book. Remember that it is the hallmark of the alcoholic that he or she is filled with denial. Denial is one of the most important indicia of the disease, and it's one of the main symptoms of the disease of alcoholism. We used to call it a disease of denial. So the big book was written for the main purpose of helping the new person overcome and break down the walls of their denial. Notice that throughout the big book, the emphasis is upon reciting for the new person those kinds of things which he or she may be able to identify with. And all the stories in the back of the book are there for that precise reason. That somewhere in those stories, that new person may find something with which they can identify themselves, and knowing that the one who wrote the story has identified themselves as an alcoholic, it makes it easier to get past that denial. And as a matter of fact, the big book is designed specifically to break down the walls of denial. It's also designed specifically to bring hope. The hope that maybe there is some recovery here. Remember what it says in the beginning of the book, in the foreword of the first edition. We are more than 100 alcoholic men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. So we know that the big book is designed to overcome that feeling of hopelessness and helplessness by showing that there is in fact a way out, which has been successful for many, many others. Today, millions of others. If you have somebody who's brand new, your concern ought to be, if you want to be helpful to him or her, that they begin the journey toward a first step. And that journey begins right here. Let's read what it says. If he is sincerely interested and wants to see you again, ask him to read this book in the interval. Deliberately, it does not say expurgated versions of this book, the Reader's Digest version of this book, or the big book as your sponsor sees it. Why would they write the whole book and then ask a newcomer to read only part of it? Why should we, as sponsors, or someone who's interested in helping a newcomer, short-circuit the process by saying, well, read the first 3 chapters, or the first 164 pages? We do that because we're scared to death this new person isn't going to do it. They're not going to read the book. We got to leave this up to God, just as with everything else that we're doing. If I say to a new person, the first thing you need to do is read the book, I've accomplished at least 2 things. I have given this new person the right instruction, read the book. But I have also set up a nearly perfect test to find out whether or not I am dealing with somebody who's serious, who really wants to recover. Yes, Johnny. Pete.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for calling me. I was wondering, would it be right to, if they're not going to take any suggestions and do what we say, and it's just by simply us, well, you have what we want, but we have to, it has to have depth and weight to our message. Wouldn't it have to share our experience first with them and then tell them to read the book?
Sure. That's just what I said. After we have told them about our drinking, told them how we recovered, told them about the disease, then, if they're still interested, we give them the book to read. Yes, Bruce.
Yeah, Bruce, I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Bruce. Hey, Juice.
I don't know about other people's experience working with new people, but I know when I first come sitting around here, I wasn't capable of reading or grasping or retaining anything in this book. I mean, it wasn't until quite a bit later I ended up having to go to my sponsor's house and read it out loud to him. And then it was just reading, still couldn't retain it. I mean, I was cooked. My mind was serious damage. And if somebody had told me to read this book and come see me, I wouldn't have made it. I would have never gotten through it.
Well, then the somebody you're talking about would need to say, look, let's read it together. Now, you're postulating something which is not important, which is not necessary. That the new person is going to read this book for content, to get the whole theory and idea of the steps and the instructions and the directions for working steps. That's not the point. The point of reading the book is to overcome the initial denial which they bring in with them, and to bring them hope. Not you can. I've been reading this book daily for 36 years, and I still find stuff in there I never knew was there. And I've been teaching it just like this for the last 20 years, and I still find stuff I didn't know was there. Because it's extraordinarily dense. I'm not talking about words I haven't seen before, but I'm talking about connections and the way how everything dovetails. It's like getting to know and understand an extraordinarily complex, fine mosaic. And each little bit in that mosaic contributes to the whole. And you could study that for your lifetime and still not know how all the pieces fit. And so I've heard that over and over and again, but let me assure you that what you did with your sponsor later is something that ought to have been done to begin with, or as soon as you were able to, get cleared up a little bit. Not because you were reading it for content, because you're reading it to be assured that you're in a place where you can recover, and to solidify whatever notion you might have as to your powerlessness over alcohol and drugs. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jim?
Yes, Billy.
Yeah, I said, hi, it's me again, Grateful Billy. And I was thinking about what you were just saying, but when I pick up anything, whether it be a newspaper article or anything else, I want to understand what I'm reading, and I want to be able to retain some of what I'm reading, some of it. I don't know, when I first came in here too, I was in a mush-mosh type of head, and I had a college education, and there was a lot of things I'd read and I couldn't understand, and like Bruce's sponsor, my sponsor made me read the book so that I would understand it, that I could understand a little bit better. Now, I don't know about you, but whenever I pick a material up of any kind, only because I'm not the kind of person that likes to read for leisure, if I'm reading it, I want to know what's going on in it, no matter what it is. If I'm reading a simple equation about, fractions, I want to understand what I'm reading. I just can't pick something up and say, well, I just want to look at it. That's like picking up a comic book. For me, I'd be looking at the picture.
What's the point?
Well, the point is, I'm saying, I think it varies. I think there's different ways we can approach depending on the individual human being that we're sponsoring. Don't you?
So what you're saying is then there will be times when you should delay having them read the book?
Well, yeah, I suppose I am.
Okay. Yes, Vinny?
Hi, I'm Little Vinny here. I'm
Uncle Jimmy.
And two people shared before, I was thinking the same thing. I was so screwed up, even in '85, coming off a relapse, that I asked my sponsor, I says, well, I've been around 12, 13 years, and I think that you're gonna show me how to do the steps right now. And he says, look, I'm your sponsor, you're my pigeon. You gave me permission to take your inventory, I never give you permission to take mine. What about the steps, Tony? He goes, don't worry about the steps right now. You're not ready for it. And he was right. I was in a fog. This is back in '85. Now in '99, when I came back, I was in an emotional basket case. I had to go on medication, and I still am. And it took doing what I knew to do, which means I went to 1,000 meetings my first year. I shared how I felt, mad, glad, or sad. I talked about what was bothering me, and I talked about the solution that I was living in. And but if I was told that right off the last time I got off that I gotta do this today, I couldn't answer. I couldn't even talk for 3 weeks, Jim. So I think it depends, like Billy and the other guys said, when is somebody ready? And the other thing I wanted to add, what I was taught by my sponsor, is that God is a gentleman, and he doesn't force his will on people. So we ought either. So in finding a prospect, there's so many AA meetings and so many newcomers, when they keep coming around the meetings, and if they like what I share, and if they respect my recovery, they have to ask me for help. I don't help anybody that doesn't ask me for help, because I'd be forcing my will on them. And that's all I've got to say.
Yes, Don?
When I sponsor somebody, I want them to have a spiritual awakening, like I've had. when I got here, they told me about the spiritual awakening, and you know, and I went through the steps, and I learned everything I could. And I was talking to Carol about when Bill had his spiritual awakening, he was by himself in the room lit up, and why the hell did that happen? I mean, he didn't have any, you know, he didn't have any directions on what to do after spiritual awakening, you know, like we do today. And it's a miracle he stays sober.
Well, what I'd like to point out to you guys is this. This book was written by a bunch of people, all of whom were the most miserable, low-bottom drunks you can imagine. And they're reporting to us here what they did. I would say I would be very careful before I would deliberately go against the directions in the Big Book. My personal experience might color my thinking, but if I want to be an effective sponsor, I need to know what the directions are. And I need to be sure that I'm not keeping my own, that I'm not letting my own predilections get in the way. Now, I've taken over 2,000 people through the steps, and I've been doing this work for a long, long time. When I hand a book to a newcomer, I do not tell them to read it. I ask them to read it. And if you look in that paragraph, you'll find that the word ask is used there. The reason we do that way is because the newcomer has already indicated to us that he wants or she wants to see us again. In other words, that there is a strong interest now in seeking the solution. And if that be so, then I'm going to see to it that he or she has a book, and I'm going to ask her or him to read it. It is after reading the book that I'm going to be able to ask the next question. Do you want what we have? And you're willing to go to any lengths to get it. Now let's see what it says here. Ask him to read this book in the interval. We're on page 95. After doing that, he must decide for himself whether he wants to go on. He should not be pushed or prodded by you, his wife, or his friends. If he is to find God, the desire must come from within. Let's go over to page 96 now. The book recognizes what all of you have been saying, that there are going to be people who will not or cannot respond. At the top of the page, do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again. Be sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you offer. We find it a waste of time to keep chasing a man who cannot or will not work with you. If you leave such a person alone, he may soon become convinced that he cannot recover by himself. To spend too much time on any one situation is to deny some other alcoholic an opportunity to live and be happy. One of our fellowship failed entirely with his first half dozen prospects. He often says that if he had continued to work with them, he might have deprived many others who have since recovered of their chance. Now this next paragraph then again is of extreme importance. Suppose you're making your second visit to a man. Of course, he may be visiting you, or you may be meeting him in a room or whatever. He has read this volume and says he is prepared to go through with the 12 steps of the program of recovery. He wants what you have, and he's willing to go to any lengths to get it, and he's ready to work the steps. Having had the experience yourself, you can give him much practical advice. Let him know you are available if he wishes to make a decision and tell his story. But do not insist upon it if he prefers to consult someone else. You notice that the Big Book is directing us that at this second meeting, when the person has read the book and they say they're ready to go, that we take them immediately to the steps. Now, you may feel that the big book is wrong about this, and that's your privilege. Your experience may be different. What you've been taught may be different. What we're teaching and learning in this workshop is what the big book says. And this, I'm not here to dictate to any of you how you're to conduct yourself in your sponsorship activities. I believe that this is right. It is what I have been doing for over 35 years, without exception, and I found that there is always a way to get the job done. If I let my doubts creep in, if I let other people influence me and tell me that this can't work or won't work, I'm disabled. I'm not going to do that. Yes, Peach?
Jim, I have a question. If we tell our story, give him the book to read, and then he wants to see us later, how are we supposed to walk day by day with this man?
Well, I don't understand the question. Why wouldn't you be able to?
Well, how would we? If we just tell him, here, read the book, and if you want what we have, then you come see me?
Because that's where it all starts. Let's go back again. We have a brand new person who walks in the door in the state of denial. What are you going to do with somebody who's denying that they're an alcoholic? They're in here crying for help, but they don't know, they haven't taken the first step. Where do you go from there? What do you do with the person who comes in here in a hopeless, helpless state of mind and body, who has no hope, is desperate enough to want help, or maybe got a nudge from the judge, maybe got pushed in here by employer, wife, or husband. It doesn't know why the hell they're here in the first place. You're not going to be walking anywhere with this person. We walk day by day in a path of spiritual progress. Spiritual progress is a product of working the steps. We have, the big book is so explicit about this. We do not waste time with people who don't want it. We don't force the program on anybody. If you follow these directions, I promise you that the results will be uniformly good. If you've got somebody who can't read, sit down and read it to them. If that's too hard for you, go find somebody else.
Thanks, Jim.
This is a new meaning to me. I never realized this, but it seems to me it's saying, you get a new sponsee, if you tell him to read the book and he doesn't, you might as well drop him.
Right.
I can drop all my sponsees then.
Did you ask him to read the book?
Well, since I came in contact with you, I have, yeah.
Well, you might want to give him a chance to finish it then. Sometimes it takes a while. And if you've been working with them, that's a horse of a different color. Because in your working with them, you've been able to evaluate if they have lost their denial and whether they are dealing with the program with a sense of hope that it will work for them. And if they have, then the purpose of reading the book at that stage is already accomplished. And it's possible, it's certainly possible to do that with force of personality or with a lot of personal contact.
So I tell the guy to call me, read the book. When he calls me, I ask him, did you read the book? No. No first step, no nothing, just, we're not gonna go any further until you read the book, right? That's kind of pushing.
What did we do?
Read the book.
And how long did it take?
Took me about 3 months.
And what are we doing tomorrow?
Still fine.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yes, Mark.
Hi, my name is Mario Martinez.
Hi, Mario.
Something that you wouldn't do nothing against the book, you know. When I read the book, I found out that they suggest that whatever, this suggestion. Say, you are so complicated. When I came first time to AA, even the things that you said before, that go immediately to the steps, but it is about somebody who is completely ready to go to the steps, somebody who is desperate to go to the steps, not somebody who don't know what they want. You know, being in this room, I saw many people who came here, been here for a few meetings, then they saw the pressure. Give them the book and press them to the book. They took the book and they ran like the rabbits. I never saw them again. That's my responsibility for them too, if I do it for them. I think some of us are ready, some not. I don't know who. Like you said, suggest, read, but I cannot make any pressure. Who I am to know if you are ready or you are not ready. If you are ready, you read the book, even if I told you, don't read it. If you're not ready, I can dance with the big book around you, you won't read it. I know one thing, when I came first time, I was so desperate. It was no such thing in my mind either, that I can live without alcohol. I was thinking that a little. But I met the people, I was so desperate, if they told me eat the shit, I would eat the shit. They told me don't drink. You cannot drink at all. Maybe if they said me walk the steps, I would walk the steps, because I was so desperate. But some people are so, in my feeling, how I feel, I have to be really careful with them. I have to be really careful and leave it up to God. Because last time when I came, I even didn't know if I want to stay in this room. But just only by coming here, hearing what the people are saying, I decided to walk the steps. I find out that I need it. But
Okay.
everybody's different. I would suggest to be careful with this.
Okay, good. Thank
Cannot
you.
press nobody to know.
Holy cow, I don't know where this time goes in this
Holy
workshop.
cow.
This is great.
Holy Toledo.
Another language, I know there's meetings.
I couldn't hear you, Joni.
Say if a person speaks a different language, I know there's other meetings, like.
If they speak Polish, you've got a meeting here tomorrow, right, Mark?
Belgian.
Okay. Anybody, did we collect money?
Yes, we did.
Oh, we did, okay. Anybody need to pick up a chip today? White, red, blue, or silver? Anybody have an AA birthday in the month of October? Tom with 12 years. How many years you got?
Celebrating 6 today.
All right. Happy birthday, man. That's terrific. Yes, ma'am.
I'm gonna be 47 tomorrow.
We don't count that. That's belly button. Any announcements for the good of AA? Quiet down, please. Yes, Mark. Hold off.
My name is Mark. I'm alcoholic. Our group needs a chairperson for a Monday and Friday 3 o'clock meeting. Anybody who is interested, there is a trusted servant for Monday.
And if you want it, you can have it, because she'll be, I can talk to her.
Hold on a minute now. Hold on a minute. What day? What time of the day is it?
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock?
Monday and Friday.
Monday and Friday.
Yes.
And see you,
No,
No.
Michelle.
Michelle.
Yeah.
Okay. She's the new trusted servant for that
Yes.
Right.
meeting. Okay. Good. Thanks, Mark. Yeah.
If anybody, I don't know if this is proper, I got an extra ticket to the gratitude dinner if anybody needs it.
For free?
No. You ain't billed right to get it free, but I've got an extra ticket if anybody needs one.
Okay. Good. Thank you. What's your name?
Rusty.
Okay, Rusty. All right. Yeah. Hey.
Oh, sorry.
Thank
I
you.
can get it free, Bill.
Quiet down just a second now. Anybody else? Anything that we need to discuss further? Any commercial announcements like bingo parties, whoopee parties, or anything like that?
I'm a grateful alcoholic, and my name is Billy. I'm gonna have a bingo party now. On Wednesdays at 8 p.m., there's a speaker meeting, and the address is 46 North Ocean in Pompano Beach. That's in the northeast intersection of A1A and Atlantic Boulevard. Church at the Beach. It's a speaker meeting. The speakers have 10 years plus. It's a speaker discussion meeting, so we need everybody there. And don't go through red lights, right, Bruce?
Okay. Let's close the meeting.
Yes, sir.
I hope you like that sandwich.
Oh, yeah, it's good.
I knew there was none, so I didn't know what he'd like, and I figured my mom likes it, and she's your age.
Let this circle represent the unity of our fellowship. A moment of silence for those who are still suffering. We'll say the Lord's Prayer together. Thank you. Lord's Prayer.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Keep coming back.
I'll see you tonight.
See this hat? This is,
That's a fedora.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a what?
It's a fedora.
WW2. And from there on, I guess, for whatever his hitch was. Once a Marine, always a Marine.
Yep.
He's one of those old boys that took it seriously, you know.
Solid career, man.
Yeah.
Sponsor Ohio next month.
77 years old, and he looks like he's about 55. Stays in shape. Ready to fight. Don't mess with me. Don't tread on me. Who opened the room up? Kevin?
I know there's one guy here. Terry.
Who?
Terry, little redhead Cherry.
Oh, yeah? She got red hair?
She's a redhead.
Is that right?
No.
You mean tight sweater Terry?
Push up, bro.
Yeah. You gotta look around. You never know when they're sneaking up on you.
Sitting there in the corner.
Yeah. Well, they tried to take Key away from Kevin the other day.
You wouldn't get
He resisted mightily. He got the key originally because he was the one that set up this meeting. I was still down in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, about half of the first workshop I came up here every Saturday. And Kevin was the member in charge, I guess he trusted servant or whatever, and he had the key. He's had a couple slips since then. No longer entitled to have a key under the rules and regulations of the great poobahs of this marvelous outfit.
Who would elect him president?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's funny. That new meeting, my husband meeting. Really like it.
Somebody's a pretty good cartoonist. This is a really nasty cartoon of Max. Mad Max at age 24.
Max.
When do we turn the clocks back, Sunday?
Tonight at 2.
What?
Tonight at 2 a.m.
Oh, tonight, huh? Really? A
Well,
Saturday
it'll
night?
Be, it'll be Sunday morning, 2 a.m.
Oh, okay.
That means it'll be lighter early or lighter later?
It'll be lighter earlier,
So it'll be
darker later. Darker earlier and lighter earlier. You know when this daylight saving time started?
Who, me? I never made it past my second year in 9th grade.
What's that got to do with it?
I have no idea what the answer is.
It was in the Second World War. It was an emergency measure
Mike,
to preserve fuel.
hanging in there.
Good deal.
Well, couldn't fly at night.
Give him Marvel.
No,
Give him Marvel.
no, that was it. Was the idea was that it would make the daylight hours longer during the summer because you'd start an hour early. I mean, you start an hour later and that extends the evening so that it stays light a lot later. That was supposed to conserve fuel. That was a temporary measure 50 years ago.